Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Welcome back, everybody, to ISKCON at Govardhana Hill, Bhaktivedanta Ashram. Thanks for joining us in the live studio audience. And for those of you who are joining on the live stream, welcome and good morning or good night. We're taking up where we left off yesterday as we are reading in the third canto. Last night we were about in the middle of chapter 5. Vidura's talks with Maitreya. And we ended with which? What? So we're on 20. Thank you. 19? Really? You did 19, we're on 20. It's a democracy, the 20s win. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Viditam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We're at 3:520. I know that you are now Vidura due to the cursing of Mandavya Muni, and that formerly you were King Yamaraj, the great controller of living entities after their death. You were begotten by the son of Satyavati, Vyasadeva, in the kept wife of his brother. Purport: Mandavya Muni was a great sage, and Vidura was formerly the controller Yamaraj, who takes charge of the living entities after death. Birth, maintenance, and death are the three conditional states of the living entities who are within the material world. As the appointed controller of death, Yamaraj once tried Mandavya Muni for his childhood profligacy, and ordered him to be pierced with a lance. Mandavya, being angry at Yamaraj for awarding him undue punishment, cursed him to become a Shudra, member of the less intelligent laborer class. Thus Yamaraj took birth in the womb of the kept wife of Vichitravirya from the semen of Vichitravirya's brother Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is the son of Satyavati from the great king Shantanu, the father of Bhishmadev. This mysterious history of Vidura was known to Maitreya Muni because he happened to be the contemporary friend of Vyasadev's. In spite of Vidura's birth from the womb of a kept wife, because he had otherwise high parentage and great connection, he inherited the highest talent of becoming a great devotee of the Lord. To take birth in such a family is understood to be an advantage for attaining devotional life. Vidura was given this chance due to his previous greatness. Please look up profligacy. Yeah? Go ahead. Use the mic.
Recklessly extravagant.
Oh. You're the one who organizes all the sound. You got to use the mic too.
Oh.
No exemptions.
Just keeping everyone on their toes. Hare Krishna. So, profligate from profligacy, recklessly extravagant or wasteful in the use of resources. Special usage means licentious, dissolute.
From
Latin profligatus, dissolute, past participle of profligare, overthrow or ruin. From pro, forward, down, plus fligore, strike down. Mid-16th century.
And the different pronunciations? Or is there only one?
For Latin,
No, for the word itself.
profligate, or both are profligate, and then profligacy.
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 Profligacy. You don't want to say it? Yes?
In the Cambridge Dictionary,
Means?
the first meaning is...
Wait, Mike.
Sorry. So the first meaning is the act of spending money wastefully, but the second meaning is bad or morally wrong behavior. So this is more fitting because he pierced an ant, I think. That was his sin.
Profligacy. Thank you. Very helpful.
Profligacy.
If I wake you up at 1 a.m, you'll say how to pronounce it. Thank you. 21. Your good self is one of the eternal associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for whose sake the Lord, while going back to his abode, left instructions with me. Purport. Yamaraj, the great controller of life after death, decides the living entities' destinies in their next lives. He is surely among the most confidential representatives of the Lord. Such confidential posts are offered to great devotees of the Lord who are as good as his eternal associates in the spiritual sky. And because Vidura happened to be among them, the Lord, while returning to Vaikuntha, left instructions for Vidura with Maitreya, Muni. Generally, the eternal associates of the Lord in the spiritual sky do not come to the material world. Sometimes they come, however, by the order of the Lord, not to hold any administrative post, but to associate with the Lord in person or to propagate the message of God in human society. Such empowered representatives are called Shaktivesh avatars, or incarnations invested with transcendental power of attorney. I shall therefore describe to you the pastimes by which the Personality of Godhead extends his transcendental potency for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic world as they occur one after another. Purport. The omnipotent Lord, by his different energies, can perform anything and everything he likes. The creation of the cosmic world is done by his Yogamaya energy. 23. The Personality of Godhead, the master of all living entities, existed prior to the creation as one without a second. It is by his will only that creation is made possible, and again everything merges in him. This Supreme Self is symptomized by different names. Purport. The great sage here begins to explain the purpose of the 4 original verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Although they have no access to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the followers of the Mayavad impersonalist school sometimes screw out an imaginary explanation of the original 4 verses. But we must accept the actual explanation given herein by Maitreya Muni, because he, along with Uddhava, personally heard it directly from the Lord. The first line of the original 4 verses runs, aham evasam evagre. The word aham is misinterpreted by the Mayavad school into meanings which no one but the interpreter can understand. Here, aham is explained as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not the individual living entities. Before the creation, there was only the Personality of Godhead. There were no Purusha incarnations and certainly no living entities, nor was there the material energy by which the manifested creation is effected. The Purusha incarnations and all the different energies of the Supreme Lord were merged in him only. The Personality of Godhead is described herein as the master of all other living entities. He is like the sun disk, and the living entities are like the molecules of the sun's rays. This existence of the Lord before the creation is confirmed by the Shrutis. Vasudevo va idam agra asit, na brahma na cha shankaraha. Eko vai narayana asin na brahma neshanaha. Because everything that be, is an emanation from the personality of Godhead. He always exists alone, without a second. He can so exist because he is all perfect and omnipotent. Everything other than him, including his plenary expansions, the Vishnu Tattvas, is his part and parcel. Before the creation, there were no Karnavashayi or Garbhadakshayi or Shirodakshayi Vishnus, or was there Brahma nor Shankara. The Vishnu plenary expansion and the living entities beginning from Brahma are separated parts and parcels. Although the spiritual existence was there with the Lord, the material existence was dormant in him. By his will only is the material manifestation done and undone. The diversity of the Vaikuntha Loka is one with the Lord, just as the diversity of soldiers is one with and at the same time, one with and the same as the king. As explained in Bhagavad-gītā 9:7, the material creation takes place at intervals by the will of the Lord, and in the periods between dissolution and creation, the living entities and the material energy remain dormant in him. 24. The Lord, the undisputed proprietor of everything, was the only seer. The cosmic manifestation was not present at that time, and thus he felt imperfect without his plenary and separated parts and parcels. The material energy was dormant, whereas the internal potency was manifested. Purport. The Lord is the supreme seer because only by his glance did the material energy become active for cosmic manifestation. At that time, the seer was there, but the external energy over which the glance of the Lord is cast was not present. He felt somewhat insufficient, like a husband feeling lonely in the absence of his wife. This is a poetic simile. The Lord wanted to create the cosmic manifestation to give another chance to the conditioned souls who were dormant in forgetfulness. The cosmic manifestation gives the conditioned soul a chance to go back home, back to Godhead. And that is its main purpose. The Lord is so kind that in the absence of such a manifestation, he feels something wanting, and thus the creation takes place. Although the creation of the internal potency was manifested, the other potency appeared to be sleeping, and the Lord wanted to awaken her to activity, just as a husband wants to awaken his wife from the sleeping state for enjoyment. It is the compassion of the Lord for the sleeping energy that he wants to see her awaken for enjoyment, like the other wives who are awake. The whole process is to enliven the sleeping conditioned souls to the real life of spiritual consciousness, so that they may thus become as perfect as the ever-liberated souls in the Vaikuntha Lokas. Since the Lord is Satchidananda Vigraha, he likes every part and parcel of his different potencies to take part in the blissful rasa, because participation with the Lord in his eternal rasa lila is the highest living condition, perfect in spiritual bliss and eternal knowledge. 25. The Lord is the seer, and the external energy which is seen works as both cause and effect in the cosmic manifestation. O greatly fortunate Vidura, this external energy is known as Maya, or illusion, and through her agency only is the entire material manifestation made possible. Purport. The material nature known as Maya is both the material and efficient cause of the cosmos, but in the background the Lord is the consciousness for all activities. As in the individual body, the consciousness is the source of all energies of the body, so the supreme consciousness of the Lord is the source of all energies in material nature. This is confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā 9:10 as follows. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagadvi parivartate. Throughout all the energies of material nature, there is the hand of the Supreme Lord as the final superintendent. Due to this supreme cause only, the activities of material nature appear planned and systematic, and all things regularly evolve. 26. Everyone okay?
Yes.
The Supreme Living Being, in his feature as the transcendental Purusha incarnation, who is the Lord's plenary expansion, impregnates the material nature of three modes, and thus, by the influence of eternal time, the living entities appear. Purport. The offspring of any living being is born after the father impregnates the mother with semen, and the living entity floating in the semen of the father takes the shape of the mother's form. Similarly, mother material nature cannot produce any living entity from her material elements unless and until she is impregnated with living entities by the Lord himself. That is the mystery of the generation of the living entities. This impregnating process is performed by the first Purusha incarnation, Karna Narnavashayi Vishnu. Simply by his glance over material nature, the whole matter is accomplished. We should not understand the process of impregnation by the personality of Godhead in terms of our conception of sex. The omnipotent Lord can impregnate just by his eyes, and therefore he is called all-potent. Each and every part of his transcendental body can perform each and every function of the other parts. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Angani yasya sakalendriya vritti manti. In Bhagavad-gītā 14.3, also the same principle is confirmed. Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham. When the cosmic creation is manifested, the living entities are directly supplied from the Lord. They are never products of material nature. Thus, no scientific advancement of material science can ever produce a living being. That is the whole mystery of the material creation. The living entities are foreign to matter, and thus they cannot be happy unless they are situated in the same spiritual life as the Lord. The mistaken living being, out of forgetfulness of this original condition of life, unnecessarily wastes time trying to become happy in the material world. The whole Vedic process is to remind one of this essential feature of life. The Lord offers the conditioned soul a material body for his so-called enjoyment. But if one does not come to his senses and enter into spiritual consciousness, the Lord again puts him in the unmanifested condition as it existed in the beginning of the creation. The Lord is described here as Viryavan, or the greatest potent being, because he impregnates material nature with innumerable living entities who are conditioned from time immemorial. 27. Thereafter, influenced by the interactions of eternal time, the supreme sum total of matter called the Mahatattva became manifested. And in this Mahatattva, the unalloyed goodness, the Supreme Lord, sowed the seeds of universal manifestation out of his own body. Purport. In due course of time, the impregnated material energy was manifested first as the total material ingredients. Everything takes its own time to fructify, and therefore the word kala choditat, influenced by time, is used herein. The Mahatattva is the total consciousness because a portion of it is represented in everyone as the intellect. The Mahatattva is directly connected with the supreme consciousness of the Supreme Being, but still it appears as matter. The Mahatattva, or shadow of pure consciousness, is the germinating place of all creation. It is pure goodness with the slight addition of the material mode of passion, and therefore activity is generated from this point. 28. Thereafter, the Mahatattva differentiated itself into many different forms as the reservoir of the would-be entities. The Mahatattva is chiefly in the mode of ignorance, and it generates the false ego. It is a plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead, with full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructification. Purport: the Mahatattva is the via medium between pure spirit and material existence. It is the junction of matter and spirit wherefrom the false ego of the living entity is generated. All living entities are differentiated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Under the pressure of false ego, the conditioned souls, although parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, claim to be the enjoyers of the material nature. This false ego is the binding force of material existence. The Lord again and again gives a chance to the bewildered conditioned souls to get free from this false ego, and that is why the material creation takes place at intervals. He gives the conditioned souls all facilities for rectifying the activities of the false ego, but he does not interfere with their small independence as parts and parcels of the Lord. Text number 29. Mahatattva, or the great causal truth, transforms into false ego, which is manifested in three phases: cause, effect, and the doer. All such activities are on the mental plane and are based on the material elements, gross senses, and mental speculation. The false ego is represented in three different modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. A pure living entity in his original spiritual existence is fully conscious of his constitutional position as an eternal servitor of the Lord. All souls who are situated in such pure consciousness are liberated, and therefore they eternally live in bliss and knowledge in the various Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky. When the material creation is manifested, it is not meant for them. The eternally liberated souls are called Nitya Muktas, and they have nothing to do with the material creation. The material creation is meant for rebellious souls who are not prepared to accept subordination under the Supreme Lord. This spirit of false lordship is called false ego. It is manifested in the three modes of material nature, and it exists in mental speculation only. Those who are in the mode of goodness think that each and every person is God, and thus they laugh at the pure devotees who try to engage in transcendental loving service of the Lord. Those who are puffed up by the mode of passion try to lord it over material nature in various ways. Some of them engage in altruistic activities as if they were agents appointed to do good to others by their mental speculative plans. Such men accept the standard ways of mundane altruism, but their plans are made on the basis of false ego. The false ego extends to the limit of becoming one with the Lord. The last class of egoistic conditioned souls, those in the mode of ignorance, are misguided by identification with the gross body, with the self. Thus, all their activities are centered around the body only. All these persons are given the chance to play with false egoistic ideas, but at the same time, the Lord is kind enough to give them a chance to take help from scriptures like Bhagavad-gītā and Srimad Bhagavatam, so that they may understand the science of Krishna and thus make their lives successful. The entire material creation, therefore, is meant for the falsely egoistic living entities hovering on the mental plane under different illusions in the modes of material nature. Look up the difference between egoistic and egotistic, please. Text 30. The false ego is transformed into mind by interaction with the modes of goodness. I'll read that again, because it's going to be on the quiz. The false ego is transformed into mind by interaction with the mode of goodness. Should I say it again?
Yes, please.
The false ego is transformed into mind by interaction with the mode of goodness. Aham tat vat. Vikurvanam mano vaikarikad abhut vaikarikash chaye deva artha bhivyajnanam yata aham tadvat, from the principle of false ego. Vikurvanat, by transformation, mana, the mind, by karikat, by interaction with the mode of goodness, abut, generated, vaikarika, by interaction with goodness, cha, also, yea, all these deva, demigods, artha, the phenomenon, abhivyanjanam, physical knowledge, yata, the source. The false ego is transformed into mind by interaction with the mode of goodness. All the demigods who control the phenomenal world are also products of the same principle, namely the interaction of the false ego and the mode of goodness. There you have it. Purport: false ego interacting with the different modes of nature, material nature, is the source of all materials in the phenomenal world. False ego interacting with the different modes of material nature is the source of all materials in the phenomenal world. You don't need much more than that one sentence to figure out that the material world's a cosmic hoax. Prabhupada calls that a cosmic hoax. Okay? Any research?
Yeah,
Uh-oh, you got to use the mic.
strike two.
Confectioner doesn't like sweets.
So, they're both very similar, but egoist tends to refer to like
Egoistic?
Egoist, yeah, egoistic
Egoistic.
is like a self-centered or selfish person who's in the second. I'm tying in the second definition with it as well. An arrogantly conceited person. And the third definition of egoist
What form
is,
of, say the forms of speech when you miss something too. Like
this
an
is a
egoistic
noun.
is an
A noun.
egoist is
Egoist
a noun.
is a noun, yeah. Egoistic would be like an adjective describing. It also says here, I searched up in a different definition of egoist, that it's like a philosophical idea also, egoistic. It was that the self is the center, and that everything should be centered around the self. It was like also, so I thought that was an interesting definition. And then egotist is a noun, a conceited, boastful person. So the way that I'm understanding it is egoist is more like thinking about the self directly, and egotist is also like thinking about the self in a way of boasting.
I see. It's like somebody says, well, what do you do? I am an egoist. It's basically all I do is think about myself. Yes, Prabhu? Please add on.
I found in another website it says that egoistic is the way you look at the world. It's making yourself at the center, versus egotistic is the way you look at yourself, like in a very inflated opinion.
That's helpful. Make some notes, okay? So we don't lose the concept. Thank you. Well, text 30, we read it. Anybody have the essence of it?
The mind comes from mode of goodness.
Use the mic. Express the... Go ahead.
The mind comes from the mode of goodness,
And what else?
mixed with false ego.
Okay, yeah, you were going to say. No? You were going to say.
The false ego is pure ignorance, so the mind comes from this mixture of ignorance with a slight tinge of goodness. This is the mind.
And in the purport, false ego interacting with the different modes of material nature is the source of all materials in the phenomenal world. It's a simple recipe. You get the false ego, which is in ignorance, and then you mix it with the modes of nature, and there's a algorithm through which the combinations and permutations of living beings based on their past karma are manifested.
Would you like a little
Text number 31. The senses are certainly products of the mode of passion in false ego, and therefore philosophical speculative knowledge and fruitive activities are predominantly products of the mode of passion. The chief function of the false ego is godlessness. When a person forgets his constitutional position as an eternally subordinate part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and wants to be happy independently, he functions mainly in two ways. He first attempts to act fruitively for personal gain or sense gratification, and after attempting such fruitive activities for a considerable time, when he is frustrated, he becomes a philosophical speculator and thinks himself to be on the same level as God. This false idea of becoming one with the Lord is the last snare of the illusory energy, which traps a living entity into the bondage of forgetfulness under the spell of false ego. The best means of liberation from the clutches of false ego is to give up the habit of philosophical speculation regarding the absolute truth. One should know definitely that the absolute truth is never realized by the philosophical speculations of the imperfect egoistic person. The absolute truth, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is realized by hearing about him in all submission and love from a bona fide authority, who is a representative of the 12 great authorities mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. By such an attempt only can one conquer the illusory energy of the Lord, although for others she is unsurpassable, as confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā 7:14. Text number 32. The sky is a product of sound, and sound is the transformation of egoistic passion. It says ignorance there?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's the same Sanskrit.
What's the Sanskrit?
Tamasa.
This is tamasa from the mode of passion.
Tamasa, lotus, shukshma deer.
What?
Mine says ignorance also.
Well, it makes sense since we're going through the modes one after another, right? The sky is a product of sound, and sound is the transformation of egoistic ignorance.
It's a sense object.
In other words, say what you mean, please use the mic.
Well, in this delineation of the material substances, there's the mind, which is transformed, which is the false ego in contact with the mode of goodness. There's the senses, which is the same false ego in touch with the mode of passion. Then you have the sense objects here. If I'm not mistaken, it's going to list out all the different sense objects. Air, touch. So those are a different category than the senses, which would, therefore it would make sense that they're from the mode of ignorance rather than the mode of passion.
Yeah, well, it says it right in the word for word, right? It's in the verse.
But there's just there looks like there was a mix-up or something. And
Yeah, but you can't change it. No, I'm just kidding. The sky is a product of sound, and sound is a transformation of egoistic ignorance. In other words, the sky is the symbolic representation of the Supreme Soul. In the Vedic hymns, it is said, Etasmad Atmanaha Akasha Sambhutaha. The sky is the symbolic representation of the Supreme Soul. Those who are egoistic in passion and ignorance cannot conceive of the personality of Godhead. For them, the sky is the symbolic representation of the Supreme Soul. 33. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead glanced over the sky. Partly thereafter, the Personality of Godhead glanced over the sky, partly mixed with eternal time and external energy, and thus developed the touch sensation from which the air in the sky was produced. All material creations take place from subtle to gross. The entire universe has developed in this manner. From the sky developed the touch sensation, which is a mixture of eternal time, the external energy, and the glance of the personality of Godhead. The touch sensation developed into the air in the sky. Similarly, all the other gross matter also developed from subtle to gross. Sound developed into sky. Touch developed into air. Form developed into fire. Taste developed into water, and smell developed into earth. 34. Thereafter, the extremely powerful air interacting with the sky generated the form of sense perception, and the perception of form transformed into electricity, the light to see the world. When electricity was surcharged in the air and was glanced over by the Supreme, at that time, by a mixture of eternal time and external energy, there occurred the creation of water and taste. Thereafter, the water produced from electricity was glanced over by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and mixed with eternal time and external energy. Thus it was transformed into the earth, which is qualified primarily by smell. Purport. From the descriptions of the physical elements in the above verses, it is clear that in all stages the glance of the Supreme is needed with the other additions and alterations. In every transformation, the last finishing touch is the glance of the Lord, who acts as a painter does when he mixes different colors to transform them into a particular color. When one element mixes with another, the number of its qualities increases. For example, the sky is the cause of air. The sky has only one quality, namely sound. But by the interaction of the sky with the glance of the Lord, mixed with eternal time and external nature, the air is produced, which has two qualities, sound and touch. Similarly, after the air is created, interaction of sky and air, touched by time and the external energy of the Lord, produces electricity. And after the interaction of electricity with air and sky, mixed with time, external energy, and the Lord's glance over them, the water is produced. In the final stage of sky, there is one quality, namely sound. In the air, two qualities, sound and touch. In the electricity, three qualities, namely sound, touch, and form. In the water, four qualities, sound, touch, form, and taste. And in the last stage of physical development, the result is earth, which has all five qualities, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. Although they are different mixtures of different materials, such mixtures do not take place automatically, just as a mixture of colors does not take place automatically without the touch of the living painter. The automatic system is factually activated by the glancing touch of the Lord. Living consciousness is the final word in all physical changes. This fact is mentioned in Bhagavad-gītā 9.10 as follows. Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagadvi parivartate. The conclusion is that the physical elements may work very wonderfully to the layman's eyes, but their workings actually take place under the supervision of the Lord. Those who can mark only the changes of the physical elements and cannot perceive the hidden hands of the Lord behind them are certainly less intelligent persons, although they may be advertised as great material scientists. Text 37. O gentle one, of all the physical elements, beginning from the sky down to the earth, all the inferior and superior qualities are due only to the final touch of the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The controlling deities of all the above-mentioned physical elements are empowered expansions of Lord Vishnu. They are embodied by eternal time under the external energy, and they are his parts and parcels. Because they were entrusted with different functions of universal duties and were unable to perform them, they offered fascinating prayers to the Lord as follows. Purport: the conception of various controlling demigods who inhabit the higher planetary systems for the management of universal affairs is not imaginary, as proposed by persons with a poor fund of knowledge. The demigods are expanded parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and they are embodied by time, external energy, and partial consciousness of the Supreme. Human beings, animals, birds, etc., are also parts and parcels of the Lord and have different material bodies. But they are not the controlling deities of material affairs. They are, rather, controlled by such demigods. Such control is not superfluous. It is as necessary as the controlling departments in the affairs of a modern state. The demigods should not be despised by the conditioned living beings. Controlled. They should not be despised by the controlled living beings. They are all great devotees of the Lord, entrusted to execute certain functions of universal affairs. One may be angry with Yamaraj for his thankless task of punishing sinful souls. But Yamaraj is one of the authorized devotees of the Lord, and so are all the other demigods. A devotee of the Lord is never controlled by such deputed demigods who function as assistants of the Lord, but he shows them all respect on account of the responsible positions to which they have been appointed by the Lord. At the same time, a devotee of the Lord does not foolishly mistake them to be the Supreme Lord. Only foolish persons accept the demigods as being on the same level as Vishnu. Actually, they are all appointed as servants of Vishnu. Anyone who places the Lord and the demigods on the same level is called pashandi, or atheist. The demigods are worshipped by persons who are more or less adherents of the processes of jnana, yoga, and karma, that is, the impersonalist meditators and fruitive workers. The devotees, however, worship only the Supreme Lord Vishnu. This worship is not for any material benefit, as desired by all the materialists, even up to the salvationists, mystics, and fruitive workers. Devotees worship the Supreme Lord to attain unalloyed devotion to the Lord. The Lord, however, is not worshipped by others who have no program for attaining love of God, which is the essential aim of human life. Persons averse to a loving relationship with God are more or less condemned by their own actions. The Lord is equal to every living entity, just as the flowing Ganges. The Ganges water is meant for the purification of everyone, yet the trees on the banks of the Ganges have different values. A mango tree on the bank of the Ganges drinks the water, and the nimba tree also drinks the same water. But the fruits of both trees are different. One is celestially sweet, and the other is hellishly bitter. The condemned bitterness of the nimba is due to its own past work, just as the sweetness of the mango is also due to its own karma. The Lord says in Bhagavad-gītā 16:19, Tan aham dushita kruran samsareshu naradaman shripam ajastrama shubhan asurashveva yonishu. The envious, the mischievous, the lowest of mankind, these do I ever put back into the ocean of material existence, into various demonic species of life. Demigods like Yamaraj and other controllers are there for the unwanted conditioned souls who always engage in threatening the tranquility of the kingdom of God. Since all the demigods are confidential devotee servitors of the Lord, they are never to be condemned. Keep out the riffraff. Okay, now we'll take some reflections or questions. Yes, Krishna Saka Prabhu.
I liked especially there are so many refutations here of Mayavadi philosophy.
Refutations of Mayavadi philosophy.
Yeah. It was said aham evasham evagre. They interpret with aham with so many things, Mayavadi. But here in the verse, it is said Bhagavan eka asedam agra. So it was pointed Bhagavan. It was like that Supreme Personality of Godhead existed before. And after a few verses of that, it was said that also I heard that Mayavadis think that the Supreme, even like Krishna is demigod, and it's like false ego with mode of goodness are demigods, so they consider one of them. So here the Bhagwan was started first, and from him everything came, so you can't refer it back that you can't consider him as also demigods and product of mode of goodness and false ego. So I was like that one.
Are you troubled by Mayavadis sometimes? You spoke that with such gusto. It made me think that perhaps you were delighted by this because it gave you some shastra. Because mostly Mayavadis in the West, they're just influenced by Yatamat Tatapat, amorphous idea, anything goes, postmodernism, your truth, my truth. But you might be coming in contact with people who are more learned. They know Sanskrit. That's why you like to have the pramanam, right? Yeah. Because the other ones, you just have to give them prasadam, and gradually, by association, they start to understand Bhagavad-gītā, where Krishna is aham, and they start to understand he's speaking directly. Yes.
Maharaj, 2 points are like, one is like how everything starts from the glance, like that is the first thing, that is the missing point in all the scientific research or explanation people give, that who created the Big Bang, or who created, but here I think that glance is the what creates everything. That is a Prabhupada's pointing, and in the prayers pointing. And second thing I notice is how when they could not understand the creative elements, they prayed. So when we pray, we are praying to someone. It's not like universe, and so they are praying to some person. So it's a personal process. I think creative element. These prayers we are reading is whose prayers? I think someone is praying to create. Creative elements are praying to.
It's just Maitreya answering Vidura's questions about how the universe comes up, right?
Right, but in the last sections, like he tells, because material element could not understand that, how they start praying to Lord.
We're getting there, almost there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I had that ongoing discussion with this professor from Brown University, and as Prabhupada writes in the 13th chapter of the Gita, 26th verse in the purport, he said, actually, people don't have any philosophy. And I read his book before I talked to him, but in the book he talks about how evolution takes place, and he's just making stuff up about how there had to be movement, and therefore the desire to consume things then created the senses, and the idea behind it was it's just mechanical, and I'm just responding to your point, which is really the main point the Prabhupada makes even in that super long purport in the Adi Lila, talking about this principle of there's a person behind the whole thing. It's not that it just out of matter, a necessity grows, and then because of the necessity, then senses manifest and so forth.
I appreciated how in the 22nd purport, Srila Prabhupada says the creation of the cosmic world is done by his yoga maya energy. Usually we hear it's done by his mahamaya energy. And in a way, in this place, he's using the word yoga maya, accentuating, I guess, the non-difference that it's the Lord's energy.
Yeah, that's there in the Gita also.
Yogamaya Samavrita.
Yogamaya Samavrita probably makes the identical comment that you're making, that they're actually the same energy, it's just the intention. He's responding to the intention of the living entity to accommodate them in different ways. Outside People's Party? Go ahead. Yes? Is someone...
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead.
I was appreciating how Prabhupada translated the word jyoti to electricity. A very interesting concept. I don't know what the original meaning of Jyoti, but it seems like, just like with the word super consciousness, it was another word which Srila Prabhupada adjusted in order to make relevant. It doesn't change the meaning, but how it's translated in English in such a way that people can relate with it is very accessible.
That's there also in the 15th chapter, right? Parastasmatu. Is it parastasmatu bhavanyo vyakto vyaktat sanata? There's no need of... Natad bhashayate surya nashashanko napavakaha yadgatvana nivartanti, etc. So that there he says, he uses that term also. No need for electricity in the spiritual world. Anyone else outside?
Jyoti's light.
Jyoti. Jyoti's light. Electricity.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada was saying how he was talking about like a mango tree. I can't remember the name of the other kind of tree.
Nimba.
Nimba, yeah, the bitter fruit tree. And he was saying how the fruit of the mango is very sweet and the fruit of the nimba is very bitter. And this is due to their own karma. I was just wondering, like, how can you make sense of karma in that way? Like, what does this mean?
Well, first of all, it's an analogy. But second of all, and analogies have some poetic license generally. But in any case, as Prabhupada mentions elsewhere, even in the lower species of life, there is evidence of good karma, bad karma. For instance, there are trees that are not so useful. Of course, the nimba, I don't know. And there's a progressive way in which living entities, because of their karma, they have a trajectory in the material world where they progressively advance, but they have to go upwards through the various channels in order to come back up to the juncture of human life. So, Karanam guna sangosya sarasad yoni janmasu. Whatever it's sad or asad, it comes from a reaction to how we've interacted with the material world. Anything else? Almost?
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking a little bit about this point. The mixtures of the elements. It's not only, of course, there's a personal glance to the Lord, but also there's each element is a person, and these are their own personal energies being empowered representatives of the Lord. For me, I don't know. It was just ringing a little more clearly that each element is itself a person. There's a person behind it.
Yeah, you find out in the Bhagavad-gītā when Kumar is navigating his way. He's not navigating his way, but he's being compelled to go to various regions. He goes through the coverings, and each one of the coverings of the universe, of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, has its own deity. And some of those realms are very inviting. There's a lot going on up there. But the point you're making is it all comes back to person. There's no impetus of material nature without a mover, and in the case of the entire material nature, there's a prime mover. Otherwise, the idea that the material nature can work by momentum has been disproven. So there has to be a prime mover. Yes?
This just raised a curious question in my mind, because, for example, in the Vedanta Sutra, it talks about Brahman desiring to be many, blinking out on the Sanskrit, but this desire to become many. Yeah, no, it's. I'm blanking out on it, but I'm thinking about how is it that Mayavadis explain that without explaining that Brahman has desire? Because, like, there has to indicate, the desire indicates personhood, it indicates personality. So I'm wondering, like, what, is that just another hole to poke in their philosophy, or is there an actual explanation that they have to that? Like, how is it that Brahman is deciding to become many?
Krishnasaka, you fight with the Mayavadis. What do you have to say?
I don't recollect perfectly, but Radhika Raman Prabhu, when he gave this seminar, he has mentioned it. I can forward that to you. It is nicely. He first explains like how they go about it, and then he refutes it. So I can send that to you if you like. Yeah. I don't fully
Mahendra
recollect.
has something he'd like to add to that.
Definitely, they have explanation for everything. So there is the two levels of Brahman. So desire comes at the low level, Saguna Brahman, but the ultimate is Nirguna. So that's the explanation.
They're like templates, one laid over the other, and they just explain it all as.
It's all illusion.
It is a
It's
troublesome
not really
philosophy. It's troublesome, but they're obstinate nonetheless. And we just read last night that a very interesting point we heard last night, where Prabhupada mentioned in his purport that Mayavadism was utilitarian. It was there specifically to move along from nihilism. And then when it was over, we were supposed to get back to normal. But somebody picked up that program and ran with it, as usual. And the thing is, living entities are so inventive and eager to find various distinguishing philosophies they can identify with, that if you come up with something, then someone will take it somewhere.
Hare Krishna.
What?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I was just going to say that one of the main functions of Mayavad philosophy is that it doesn't make sense. That's why it's Mayavad. It's not supposed to make sense.
Right.
It's part of their explanation is this.
That's how they get you, right?
Yeah, it's so
understand
confusing that it must be true.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The disturbed seeker sees it as a feature.
What's that?
The disturbed seeker sees that its nonsensicality as a feature, not as a...
Its nonsensicality is its feature. Word jugglery. Okay, more on Mayavad for 500. Go ahead.
No, I was saying about the point you made from the Buddhism philosophy to Mayavad. Previously, the Veda, there was a ladder given actually. I was hearing one class that, not the ladder, but the succession that because of the Vedas, people were killing animals. So Lord Buddha appeared. He gave the philosophy of Buddhism to to give up the Vedas. Then Mayavad philosophy came. Then Advaita Vedanta by not Advaita, Visishta Advaita by Ramanujacharya, and then Madhvacharya, and then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu thought that the succession from how it appeared, it feels like Krishna's arrangement so that people can come.
But nonetheless, some people took the old script and kept it going. That was one of the points. But nice points you made.
Just to add a little bit on the history, as you said, it was supposed to serve the purpose, but they picked it up and developed. So historically, even there are serious scholars who studied a lot of Shankara's works, and actually he's not a Mayavadi in that sense. He doesn't say that everything is Maya, and he identifies Parabrahman as Narayan very clearly. And Prabhupada often quotes his Tika to Bhagavad-gītā in the beginning. He opens with that, Narayana Parovyaktat. But in many of his purports to Brahma Sutras, he also identifies Parabrahman as Narayan. But just he emphasized the monistic side, the oneness of everything, and to re-establish the Vedas, etc. And then after that, they came up with all these ideas of that the Parabrahman is the non-dual and without any qualities like that, and that Maya, the material energy is also illusion. It's non-existent. He never said that Maya is non-existent. So this came up later. These developments.
Oh, thank you. Very helpful. In Western preaching, you don't get to use these arguments because nobody has any idea about that. Okay, we are continuing, and I believe we're on text number 39. Yep. We have Deva Uchu. Who was waiting for this? Mukharvind was hopeful to hear this section. The demigod said, "O Lord, your lotus feet are like an umbrella for the surrendered souls, protecting them from all the miseries of material existence. All the sages under that shelter throw off all material miseries. We therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet." Purport. There are many sages and saints who engage in trying to conquer rebirth and all other material miseries, but of all of them, those who take shelter unto the lotus feet of the Lord can completely throw off all such miseries without difficulty. Others who are engaged in transcendental activities in different ways cannot do so. For them it is very difficult. They may artificially think of becoming liberated without accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, but that is not possible. One is sure to fall again to material existence from such false liberation, even though one may have undergone severe penances and austerities. This is the opinion of the demigods, who are not only well versed in Vedic knowledge, but are also seers of the past, present, and future. The opinions of the demigods are valuable because the demigods are authorized to hold positions in the affairs of universal management. They are appointed by the Lord as his confidential servants. Text 40. O Father, O Lord, O Personality of Godhead, the living entities in the material world can never have any happiness because they are overwhelmed by the three kinds of miseries. Therefore they take shelter of the shade of your lotus feet, which are full of knowledge, and we also take shelter of them. Purport. The way of devotional service is neither sentimental nor mundane. It is the path of reality, by which the living entity can attain the transcendental happiness of being freed from the three kinds of material miseries. Miseries arising from the body and mind, from other living entities, and from natural disturbances. Everyone who is conditioned by material existence, whether he be a man or beast, or demigod or bird, must suffer from adhyatmika, bodily or mental pains, adibhautika, pains those offered by living creatures, and adidaivika, pains those due to supernatural disturbances. His happiness is nothing but a hard struggle to get free from the miseries of conditional life. But there is only one way he can be rescued, and that is by accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The argument that unless one has proper knowledge, one cannot be freed from material miseries is undoubtedly true. But because the lotus feet of the Lord are full of transcendental knowledge, acceptance of his lotus feet completes that necessity. We have already discussed this point in the first canto, 127. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam. There is no want of knowledge in the devotional service of Vasudeva, the Personality of Godhead. He, the Lord, personally takes charge of dissipating the darkness of ignorance from the heart of a devotee. He confirms this in Bhagavad-gītā 10:10. Tesham satatayuktanam vajata priti purvakam dadami buddhiyogam tam yena mam upayanti te Empiric philosophical speculation cannot give one relief from the threefold miseries of material existence. Simply to endeavor for knowledge without devoting oneself to the Lord is a waste of valuable time. The lotus feet of the Lord are by themselves the shelter of all places of pilgrimage. The great clear-minded sages, carried by the wings of the Vedas, always search after the nest of your lotus-like face. Some of them surrender to your lotus feet at every step by taking shelter of the best of rivers, the Ganges, which can deliver one from all sinful reactions. The paramahaṁsas are compared to royal swans who make their nests on the petals of the lotus flower. The Lord's transcendental bodily parts are always compared to the lotus flower because in the material world the lotus flower is the last word in beauty. The most beautiful thing in the world is the Vedas or Bhagavad-gītā because therein knowledge is imparted by the Personality of Godhead Himself. The paramahaṁsa makes his nest in the lotus-like face of the Lord and always seeks shelter at his lotus feet, which are reached by the wings of Vedic wisdom. Since the Lord is the original source of all emanations, intelligent persons enlightened by Vedic knowledge seek the shelter of the Lord, just as birds who leave the nest again search out the nest to take complete rest. All Vedic knowledge is meant for understanding the Supreme Lord, as stated by the Lord in Bhagavad-gītā 15:15. Vedaiś sarvair aham vedyaḥ. Intelligent persons who are like swans take shelter of the Lord by all means and do not hover on the mental plane by fruitlessly speculating on different philosophies. The Lord is so kind that He has spread the river Ganges throughout the universe, so that by taking bath in that holy river, everyone can get release from the reactions of sins, which occur at every step. There are many rivers in the world which are able to evoke one's sense of God consciousness simply by one's bathing in them. And the river Ganges is chief amongst them. In India there are 5 sacred rivers, but the Ganges is the most sacred. The river Ganges and Bhagavad-gītā are chief sources of transcendental happiness for mankind, and intelligent persons can take shelter of them to go back home, back to Godhead. Even Sripad Shankaracharya recommends that a little knowledge in Bhagavad-gītā and the drinking of a little quantity of Ganges water can save one from the punishment of Yamaraj. Simply by hearing about your lotus feet with eagerness and devotion, and by meditating upon them within the heart, one at once becomes enlightened with knowledge, and on the strength of detachment one becomes pacified. We must therefore take shelter of the sanctuary of your lotus feet. The miracles of meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord with eagerness and devotion are so great that no other process can compare to it. The minds of materialistic persons are so disturbed that it is almost impossible for them to search after the supreme truth by personal regulative endeavors. But even such materialistic men with a little eagerness for hearing about the transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc., can surpass all other methods of attaining knowledge and detachment. The conditioned soul is attached to the bodily conception of life, and therefore he is in ignorance. Culture of self-knowledge can bring about detachment from material affection, and without such detachment there is no meaning of knowledge. The most stubborn attachment for material enjoyment is sex life. One who is attached to sex life is to be understood as devoid of knowledge. Knowledge must be followed by detachment. That is the way of self-realization. These two essentials for self-realization, knowledge and detachment, become manifest very quickly if one performs devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord. The word dhira is very significant in this connection. A person who is not disturbed even in the presence of cause of disturbance is called dhira. Sri Jamunacharya says, Since my heart has been overwhelmed by the devotional service of Lord Krishna, I cannot even think of sex life, and if the thoughts of sex come upon me, I at once feel disgust. A devotee of the Lord becomes an elevated hira by the simple process of meditating in eagerness on the lotus feet of the Lord. Devotional service entails being initiated by a bona fide spiritual master and following his instruction in regard to hearing about the Lord. Such a bona fide spiritual master is accepted by regularly hearing from him about the Lord. The improvement in knowledge and detachment can be perceived by devotees as an actual experience. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu strongly recommended this process of hearing from a bona fide devotee, and by following this process one can achieve the highest result, conquering all other methods. 43. O Lord, you assume incarnations for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation, and therefore we all take shelter of your lotus feet because they always award remembrance and courage to your devotees. For the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestations, there are three incarnations, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, Lord Shiva. They are the controllers or masters of the three modes of material nature which cause the phenomenal manifestation. Vishnu is the master of the mode of goodness. Brahma is the master of the mode of passion. And Maheshwara is the master of the mode of ignorance. There are different kinds of devotees according to the modes of nature. Persons in the mode of goodness worship Lord Vishnu. Those in the mode of passion worship Brahma. And those in the mode of ignorance worship Lord Shiva. All three of these deities are incarnations of the Supreme Lord Krishna because he is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. The demigods directly refer to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord and not to the different incarnations. The incarnation of Vishnu in the material world is, however, directly worshipped by the demigods. It is learned from various scriptures that the demigods approach Lord Vishnu in the ocean of milk and submit their grievances whenever there is some difficulty in the administration of universal affairs. Although they are incarnations of the Lord, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva worship Lord Vishnu, and thus they are also counted amongst the demigods and not as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Persons who worship Lord Vishnu are called demigods, and persons who do not do so are called asuras, or demons. Vishnu always takes the part of the demigods, but Brahma and Shiva sometimes take the side of the demons. It is not that they become one in interest with them, but sometimes they do something in order to gain control over the demons. 44. O Lord, persons who are entangled by undesirable eagerness for the temporary body and kinsmen, and who are bound by thoughts of mine and I, are unable to see your lotus feet, although your lotus feet are situated within their own bodies. But let us take shelter of your lotus feet. The whole Vedic philosophy of life is that one should get rid of the material entanglement of gross and subtle bodies, which only cause one to continue in a condemned life of miseries. The material body continues as long as one is not detached from the false conception of lording it over material nature. The impetus for lording it over material nature is the sense of mine and I. I am the Lord of all I survive. So many things I possess, and I shall possess more and more. Who can be richer than me in wealth and education? I am the Master, and I am God. Who else is there but me? All these ideas reflect the philosophy of aham mama, the conception that I am everything. Persons conducted by such a conception of life can never get liberation from material bondage. But even a person perpetually condemned to the miseries of material existence can get relief from bondage if he simply agrees to hear only Krishna Katha. In this age of Kali, the process of hearing Krishna Katha is the most effective means to gain release from unwanted family affection and thus find permanent freedom in life. The age of Kali is full of sinful reactions, and people are more and more addicted to the qualities of this age. But simply by hearing and chanting of Krishna Katha, one is sure to go back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, people should be trained to hear only Krishna Katha by all means in order to get relief from all miseries. 45. O great Supreme Lord, offensive persons whose internal vision has been too affected by external materialistic activities cannot see your lotus feet, but they are seen by your pure devotees, whose one and only aim is to transcendentally enjoy your activities. As stated in Bhagavad-gītā 18:61, the Lord is situated in everyone's heart. It is natural that one should be able to see the Lord at least within himself. But that is not possible for those whose internal vision has been covered by external activities. The pure soul, which is symptomized by consciousness, can be easily perceived even by a common man, because consciousness is spread all over the body. The pure soul, which is symptomized by consciousness, can be easily perceived even by a common man, because consciousness is spread all over the body. The yoga system, as recommended in Bhagavad-gītā, is to concentrate the mental activities internally and thus see the lotus feet of the Lord within oneself. But there are many so-called yogis who have no concern with the Lord but are only concerned with consciousness, which they accept as the final realization. Such realization of consciousness is taught by Bhagavad-gītā within only a few minutes, whereas the so-called yogis take continuous years to realize it because of their offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord. The greatest offense is to deny the existence of the Lord as separate from the individual souls, or to accept the Lord as the individual soul as one and the same. The impersonalists manifest the theory of reflection, and thus they wrongly accept the individual consciousness as the supreme consciousness. The theory of reflection of the Supreme Lord can be clearly understood without difficulty by any sincere common man. When there is a reflection of the sky on the water, both the sky and the stars are seen within the water, but it is understood that the sky and the stars are not to be accepted on the same level. The stars are parts of the sky, and therefore they cannot be equal to the whole. The sky is the whole, and the stars are parts. They cannot be one and the same. Transcendentalists who do not accept the supreme consciousness as separate from the individual consciousness are as offensive as the materialists who deny even the existence of the Lord. Such offenders cannot actually see the lotus feet of the Lord within themselves, nor are they even able to see the devotees of the Lord. The devotees of the Lord are so kind that they roam to all places to enlighten people in Krishna consciousness, in God consciousness. The offenders, however, lose the chance to receive the Lord's devotees, although the offenseless common man is at once influenced by the devotees' presence. In this connection, there is an interesting story of a hunter and Devarshi Narada. A hunter in the forest, although a great sinner, was not an intentional offender. He was at once influenced by the presence of Narada, and he agreed to take the path of devotion, leaving aside his hearth and home. But the offenders, Nalakuvara and Manigriva, even though living amongst the demigods, had to undergo the punishment of becoming trees in their next lives, although by the grace of a devotee they were later delivered by the Lord. Offenders have to wait until they receive the mercy of devotees, and then they can become eligible to see the lotus feet of the Lord within themselves. But due to their offenses and their extreme materialism, they cannot see even the devotees of the Lord. Engaged in external activities, they kill the internal vision. The Lord's devotees, however, do not mind the offenses of the foolish in their many gross and subtle bodily endeavors. The Lord's devotees continue to bestow the blessings of devotion upon all such offenders without hesitation. That is the nature of devotees. Why did you say Jai? Explain yourself. Give him the mic.
The Lord's devotees continue to bestow the blessings of devotion upon all such offenders without hesitation. That is the nature of devotees. Well, what chance would they have without the mercy of the devotee? Because the Lord's mercy follows his devotee's mercy. So it's the sweet will of a devotee to give compassion, even when compassion is higher than justice. So that's worthy of a jai. Justice is getting what you deserve. Compassion is getting something you don't deserve, something much better.
Thank you. Anybody else on that topic? Realizations from the field? Go ahead.
I was also reflecting just how Srila Prabhupada exemplified in such a profound way. Especially this line, he says, the Lord's devotees, however, do not mind the offenses of the foolish in their many gross and subtle bodily endeavors. There's so many times Srila Prabhupada had to deal with so many different types of persons who were offensive in their ways of acting and speaking and being. So he was so ready to give them mercy despite their incapability to reciprocate properly with him.
As are you. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
You don't have to answer, right? But, you're going out and meeting people from various backgrounds, right? And what's it feel like? How's it go? Straightforward every time? Give us some field notes.
I reflect on a line. I wish I could remember where I read it, but it was described that the Vaishnava, the nature of the Vaishnava, or in our service of sharing Krishna consciousness, we don't expect that people are ever going to appreciate what we're giving them, but we just continue to give. And I kind of remember that in most circumstances on the streets or on campuses, wherever I may be. And I find that it's quite rewarding when Krishna arranges that somebody does reciprocate, or just seeing how even when they get a book and they don't reciprocate, they still take it, and their life is transformed. And we just don't know how it's going to work in everybody's life, and even whether they know it or not.
It could be a mango or a nimba. We were in Denver and we went door to door with most of the assembly of devotees there in Denver, maybe about 25 devotees, and we descended upon an apartment complex. And just thinking off the top of my head of the various reactions we saw, one of them, we had one of the devotees there who's a doctor, and he was going around with us, and somebody opened their door and saw him, and then they immediately slammed their door. And I said, wow, maybe that's the first time that's ever happened to you, right? And then another place we went, which was way down at the bottom of the apartment complex, which was scary because the place was a wreck anyway. As soon as the person opened the door, she said, I'm really busy. And she goes, Bhagavad-gītā, I've been waiting for that. And there are all these combinations and permutations of reactions that one gets. And you see that phenomena of people's receptivity based on their present consciousness. And then another person, when we went to his door, he was on the top floor. He said, no, not interested. And we said, just take it, give anything. And he said, okay. At first he was adamantly against it, and then somehow or other he just changed his mind because he's a tatastha jiva. And then we closed the door. We went outside because we were going to the next apartment complex, and we looked upstairs, and he was hanging over the railing reading the book. And so that when we go out to present Krishna consciousness, then we can see firsthand the various reactions that people have based on their consciousness. And that brings us to the Gayatri break. So we're going to be back here at 10 minutes after 12. That's in exactly 10 minutes. We'll see you then. Hare Krishna.